welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Welcome to Turn the Page podcast. This is Jessica. I will be hosting you today, and we're welcoming back an author of thrillers. This is your second, correct?
The third, actually.
The third. Oh my gosh, I am so sorry. I know.
No worries.
The last one we did was
I think The Perfect Escape is the one.
The Perfect Escape. I wanted to say The Great Escape, but that is actually an amusement park upstate, like near Lake George, I think, in New York.
Yes.
For those who are not in New York. What was your first book? How did I miss that?
All the Broken People.
Yes.
It was also set upstate, but it did come out like June 2020. So it was a wild time for books.
Yeah,
it came out right in the middle of everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
But
it really was.
Leah Konen, welcome back. Why don't you tell us about this new book and what it is about?
So You Should Have Told Me follows Janie, who is a new mother. Her baby is about 6 weeks old, and she's definitely struggling with caring for an infant. And, she kind of opens up to her partner about how hard it is and how she's really, having a difficult time of it. And so he very helpfully says, why don't you go sleep in the guest bedroom tonight? Why don't you catch up on sleep? I'm going to do all the feedings tonight. And hopefully you'll feel better in the morning. And she wakes up at 3 a.m. and her baby is screaming and her partner has disappeared. And then, basically she's kind of having to put the pieces back together while she's trying to care for this baby. And then, of course, to add fuel to the fire, it turns out that her boyfriend was at a bar, the night that he was supposed to be taking care of their baby. And at this bar, she finds out a woman has been murdered there that night. So it's kind of a mix of like this domestic intensity of what is going on with my partner, like how could I thought I have known someone and I don't, and also this murder investigation for this woman.
I liked it, and I love that it's set in that early time of motherhood, and you're actually one of many authors I've had on here before where we've discussed how terrifying motherhood in general is, and especially for those first few weeks for somebody who's new to this and is sort of trying to figure out where everything fits, because your life is completely different and everyone expects you to glow. That's the other thing.
Exactly. I think people expect you to be super positive, to just be, it's a blessing what's happening to you. And of course you love your child. But I think it's a really scary time for a lot of people, a lot of women. And I think there's so much that you're already naturally worried about. You're worried about the baby sleeping and the baby being safe when they're sleeping, and if they're getting enough food and gaining weight and healthy and all these things. And then so to me, if you layer on this other worry about who is your partner, how did I think I knew this person and maybe I don't, and then also what is going on with this murder investigation, who is this woman, I think you kind of have this perfect storm of all these different things happening. And I think it's just to me, I wanted to see more portrayals of early motherhood, like honest portrayals. So, I felt like I wanted to write that.
So Janie, she's not married, but she's partnered with this man, Max, who used to be a musician. He's from a family that is different from hers. She has a different relationship with her mother, and his family seems very well to do. And he has this childhood friend, Liana, who is also part of the band that he was part of, and sort of is like a package deal with Max. And they're like almost on like a retreat, like a first few weeks retreat when you start the story, right? Why did you decide to set it in the Kingston area?
My family and I have a weekend place we live in Brooklyn, but we have a place in near Woodstock, New York, and we kind of did the same thing. When we had our daughter, we met friends and family and stuff in Brooklyn, and then we just felt like it's going to be so much easier and more pleasant to take our leave upstate where you can breathe, there's not so much noise, and there's laundry in your house instead of 5 blocks away. So, first of all, I love to set books in this area, but I also love to set books that kind of chronicle people who are outsiders. So I didn't want them to just live there. I wanted them to kind of be out of their element. So I thought having them naturally away from their networks, and up at this idyllic place that wasn't turning out to be so idyllic for either of them was kind of a way to just up the isolation and the intensity and all those things that I think most new parents are going through anyway, but to really, really crank it up to 11.
Yeah, no, that was good. And what was kind of interesting about it is, so Janie has kind of a past, she's not working right now. And she has past work friends who she's sort of allowed to kind of go by the wayside for reasons of her own. But New York is kind of a small area, and it seems like when a place gets trendy, everybody decides they're going to start going there. So where you wouldn't necessarily hear of people being like, yeah, we're going to go to the Kingston area, for instance, to live, or we're going to go to the Kingston area for a vacation, maybe 15 years ago. When something gets hot, everybody's like, yeah, this is where we're going. So she is away from her network. But when Max disappears, and all she has is Max's family and Leanna, which, she wants to be, to get their support. The others who were her network are also sort of knocking on her door. And she has this baby, Freya, by the way, which I love the name. You're from Brooklyn. Are there a lot of babies that are Freya in Brooklyn? I just curious.
I don't know any, but it sounds like it fits. We live in Park Slope, and if
My
I
best
met
friend lived there for 15 years.
yes,
Yeah.
if I met a Freya, I would not be surprised, I guess, at all.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think you hit it on the head. It is the Catskills right around the area is super trendy right now. And I think especially after the pandemic, more and more people just kind of fled there because it's really not that far from the city. It's a couple of hours. So I like that juxtaposition of people who are originally from a place and then people who are coming in and the people who are visiting. And I think it's always interesting to explore that kind of push pull when you have a place that's not a big city but is so influenced by a city nearby. And I think, it's I remember, this is years ago, but I remember I was in Woodstock one weekend and we went out to brunch, and it's I ran into my boss who was just, having brunch at the same spot. He didn't even live there. He just was up with his family for a couple days. And I think especially in New York City, it's so big, but you have these pockets in the tri-state area where people tend to go on the weekends. So you do run into people.
Yeah, I remember a few years ago, Beacon was really, really hot.
Yeah, Beacon I remember that too, everyone talking about Beacon.
Yeah. But anyway, so I just liked the structure of the story. I liked that it was set in Brooklyn. I liked the whole thing, the dynamic with, Janie has a very different relationship with her parents than Max does. Why did you want to decide, why did you decide to, craft that? I think it's very natural. I like it, but was it very clear in your head that they were just going to relate to their parents very differently?
Yeah, so I think so much of this book is about both identity, but also about what family looks like and what that means. And I think in Janie's case, even though they aren't married yet, they are partners and they have this child, and she's just kind of been absorbed into Max's world. Like Liana, his best friend growing up, is one of her best friends now, and she feels this kind of safety and security with his parents that she really never kind of felt with her own. And so I think when Max does disappear and she starts to learn things from his parents and from Liana that she didn't actually know about, but they knew all along, I think it shakes her even more than if she hadn't had a really close relationship with them. Because it's kind of that interesting thing where when you do have like an adopted family like that, it feels like your family, but you don't have the same history as you do with your own family. So there's a lot of exploration of what family even means and how to kind of create your own and what that can mean for you.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, especially nowadays when people are living further away from where they grew up, for instance, or just the way that we communicate is different. And also post-COVID, it's either like people had gotten super close
Hmm.
or a lot of people just kind of let relationships, even family, fall away. I really liked that. It rang true. Also, I think like sometimes, depending on what your relationship is with your own parents, like when you first meet your significant other's parents, not everybody, but some people romanticize it and they're just like, oh, they're so, this with my partner. They never do this and this is what annoys me about my parents. And then as you grow and learn, sometimes you're just like, oh, they're not perfect either. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think you can really seek out and gravitate towards things that you felt were lacking in your own family of origin. And so for Janie, she feels this pull of financial security that Max's family has. And to her, that's everything because she grew up without it. So I think because of that, she actually is blind to some of the things that are going on because she does feel secure with them. And, the money, as it turns out, can be good and can be helpful. But in this specific story, it can also cause its own problems. And I think that's part of what she comes to realize.
Yeah, definitely. And the relationship between Max and Liana, I just kind of wanted to throw that in there really quickly. There's a lot more to the story because, he is caught up in this murder investigation, which we haven't even really talked about. But I feel like if we do, it'll just sort of open up twists and turns that the off that, that like the reader really probably should start following when they read the book.
Totally.
But like having Max have his best friend be a really beautiful woman who he was in a band with, that was a really interesting addition.
I had so much fun with the character of Liana, and I think when I was in my 20s, I was living in Brooklyn, but in Williamsburg specifically, and there was just a lot of bands around playing all the time and socializing and all that, and it was fun to kind of have a window into that world, and I had a lot of fun channeling that for Max and Liana, but I think there's something so interesting about playing with a trope because you meet her and you immediately think like, oh, the best, the beautiful best friend who's never been, married or in a really super serious relationship herself, and they're joined at the hip and they do all these things together. And so I think any reader is going to have all these natural suspicions. And so something I wanted to play with in the book without giving too much away is turning some of that on its head and looking at, being able to let Liana come into herself as a character. And, maybe there are reasons to suspect her and maybe they're not. I don't want to give anything away, but I didn't want it to just be this. I wanted her and Janie to have a genuine friendship. I didn't want it to be this jealousy thing that you can kind of so frequently see in relationships like that.
Yeah, that was really refreshing. I was really happy because when she showed up at first, I'm like, ah, okay. And then I'm just like, oh no, actually, we're not going in that direction. And I applaud. So I can applaud the author in person. Good job.
Thank you.
Yeah. So one more thing I kind of wanted to talk about is children's bands that are kind of trendy.
Oh my gosh.
Because that's a thing now. I mean, like when I was a kid, like you didn't, like it was like you have Raffi and you're just like, oh my God, like nowadays I'm like, oh, really? I'm just going to play the Foo Fighters for my kids and hope for the best. But there is this trend of like hipster bands for kids.
It's hilarious. I mean, it's a very small part of the book, but one of the opening scenes, yes, is them, Max and Janie at this concert. And what Max points out is that this children's concert, and what he points out is that it's actually the same people from this band that he and Janie used to see, you know, all the time, and it was one of their favorites. And I think it's so funny because, I mean, especially again being in Park Slope, I do see a lot of that. Like you see a lot of these bands that found a niche doing this children's music, and there is a need for it because people want, I think they want more options than maybe what like what our parents could play for us growing up. So I think it's kind of just a fun and funny thing to explore, and another one of those things that kind of adds this layer of kind of the Brooklyn parenting scene to the whole book.
So are you working on another book?
Yes, I am like revising it right now. And it's super fun. It's like influenced a little bit about parenthood, but it focuses basically on these two friends who meet at a playground in Brooklyn, and they both have toddlers, and they kind of become close friends fast. And then it starts to look like one of the women maybe isn't who she says she is. And so it's
I
kind of
love everything about it
exploring.
already.
It's exploring, I think, when you're in that stage of parenthood and you are making friends through your children, you can get so close to people without actually knowing a whole lot about them. And I think that's just such a fascinating thing. But yeah, it's really fun. It was partially inspired by the Patricia Highsmith novel Strangers on a Train. So so as I pitched it, I said
Nice.
it's like
I had a feeling when you started talking, I'm like, oh, is this going to be like a Strangers on the Train? Because that would be awesome.
I pitched it as it's Strangers on a Train, but the train is a Park Slope playground.
Nice.
And everything ends up unfolding in upstate New York, where basically the women meet in Brooklyn, but then a few months go by and they reconnect in Woodstock, except for this time one of the women is using a completely different name and has a completely different family. So yeah.
Oh my God, that's so cool.
It's really exploring like what is going on with her and what does this friendship mean. And of course, this is one of my books. Everyone has their own secrets and their own things going on in the past.
Wow, I love it. I have to ask, did you watch Do Revenge, which is like an homage to 90s. It was like an homage to 90s teen movies, but it was also kind of like Strangers on a Train at the same time.
I didn't, but I should definitely check it out.
It's like one of those things, like listeners, if you are a fan of movies like Clueless and pretty much like every 90s teen movie, this movie, it has Maya Hawke, and I'm trying to remember what her name is. I have to look it up. She plays Veronica in Riverdale, but basically there's this they're in this like elite school, and one of them, her boyfriend, like releases a video of them. Oh yes, okay, so it is Camila Mendez and Maya Hawke. And Maya Hawke shows up, and she's kind of like this rebel outcast, and her ex-girlfriend goes to the school, and they decide they're going to humiliate each other's exes, but then there's other stuff that happens, and Sarah Michelle Gellar's in it. So
Oh my gosh.
yeah,
Love
it's
it.
like, it's super. My husband was like, this is really bad and derivative, and I'm like, it's not bad, it's derivative, sure. I'm like, but it knows what it's doing, and it's doing it
Totally.
really, really well. So
Totally.
yeah, that's the last Strangers on a Train adaptation I saw, which was kind of fun. So I'm excited for yours. That sounds great.
Thank you.
Is it called Strangers on a Playground?
Oh my God. Should you be titling my books? It is not, but maybe we should explore that.
That doesn't even sound good. Come on. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
I don't have I'm not sure if our title is final yet, so I don't have something to share quite yet, but we should get there soon, and
All right.
I will share.
Well, if it is Strangers on a Playground, just thank Syosset Library.
Yeah, I will. You will be credited in the acknowledgments.
And if it isn't, I highly agree that shouldn't be the title. But anyway, thank you so much, Leah Konen. It was wonderful having you back. I certainly hope to see you again next year.
Yeah, seriously, I love libraries and love that you do this, and it's just so great to have these awesome conversations.
Fabulous. Once again, this was Jessica with Syosset Library, Turn the Page podcast. Our guest today was
Leah Konen.
And we are going to close this chapter.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.